Wanna, I mean, are we just talking about these stories kind of in the order they are?
I
I
think we
think
can
we should
go in the
do.
order that they're there.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
The big thing is the the first thing.
Yeah. Here you go. Three, two. This is SoundNotion, the weekly podcast for new music and music news. I'm David McDonald.
I'm Nate Blyton.
And I'm Sam Merciers.
And this week, if you do not like long episodes of SoundNotion, you might consider breaking this one into a couple of different episodes for yourself, or maybe skipping it altogether. Though you shouldn't really skip it, because we've got a great interview with Alan Pearson, the music director for Alarmal Sound, about a wonderful project that Alarmal Sound embarked on just a couple of weeks ago with collaboration with Medeski, Martin, and Wood, and it's a long-term project where they're going to be collaborating with a bunch of other artists, and we talked to him about it for almost an hour a couple of weeks ago, so we've actually already pre-recorded that, but we were going to have a very short show this week that was just going to have that interview, and then some other things decided to happen this week. We learned this week about the New York Youth Symphony deciding not to perform a work that they had themselves commissioned, which is already at least somewhat unusual, not totally unheard of. But what's weird about it is the reasoning and the amount of attention it's gotten. So this performance, actually, I said premiered, but they were actually already premiering the work. They premiered the work last month, and it's a work by a 21-year-old Estonian composer named Jonas Tarm. And it's called March u Nebutia, which means March to Oblivion. And
Very
the
nice.
rehearsals began in December. What was that, Sam?
Very nice pronunciation. by the
Yeah,
way.
I did what I
great.
can with the. I'm not really much. I'm not really up on my Estonian or Ukrainian or whatever language that is in, but I give it a shot.
Well,
Anyway, rehearsals on this piece, March to Oblivion, began in December. It was premiered in February, and after the premiere, they got a letter from someone who was at the concert complaining about the content of the work, which is pretty unusual for an orchestral work. And this is, a pretty solid youth orchestra. This is not your average, amateur youth orchestra. These guys are good. And they got an anonymous letter from that was signed a Nazi survivor, saying that there was a quotation in the piece, which is about a 45-second quotation in something like a 10 or 12-minute work, right? Or maybe it's 9 minutes. I read somewhere 9 minutes. Anyway,
oh yeah,
of the Nazi anthem, the Horst Wessel song, which is I can imagine how that would trigger some pretty nasty memories and experiences for a Nazi survivor, but because of this letter and because of this information, the New York Youth Symphony executive director Shauna Quill decided to cancel this upcoming performance, which was to take place, I believe, today as we're recording this on Sunday, March.
8th.
What is it? March 9th, 8th at Carnegie Hall. So this was a pretty big deal performance for the composer and for the orchestra. The orchestra, I presume, is still going to be giving the performance just without this work. And so a lot of people have chimed in about this, and we were talking about it before the show. I think what's going to happen here is instead of having a long debate, we're just going to all angrily agree with one another. Sam, what was your thought when you read about this story, about this work being pulled?
Well, there's a lot of thoughts. To me, one of the more frustrating things is that it seems to come down to they said it would be okay if he had let them know about it beforehand and given some context for why he was using it. I don't think that an artist should be forced to explain the context of using a piece of content to validate its right to be there. It's obviously an abstracted idea, and you shouldn't have to prove that you're not doing it as a way to. The idea that he's doing it because he's pro-Nazi is ridiculous. So automatically you turn to he's abstracting it for artistic purpose. Isn't that enough? It's like we have to get something on paper so nobody can prove that the youth orchestra did something bad by, quote, endorsing Nazism or whatever.
Well, and he did say that he did say that this is a piece about the horrors of war and totalitarianism and the kinds of those kinds of regimes. It includes this quote from the Nazi anthem. It also includes a quotation from the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic anthem. So there are a number of references to oppressive regimes, and a number of the write-ups of this brought up uses of other quotations in works like the Marseillaise in Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture. Surely people who heard that had some pretty nasty experiences with Napoleon, but nobody said we shouldn't perform Tchaikovsky because it would offend people who were affected by Napoleon. Having said that, I don't think it's totally unreasonable to ask the composer to explain himself. I don't think we should be pulling the work because the composer didn't, but I think it's a little bit kind of insular and standoffish for a composer in all of the ways that people accuse classical music of being outside of culture. This is that. When the composer says, no, I don't want to talk about this thing that I included that is a cultural reference, and not just a cultural reference, but an extremely loaded cultural reference. If you're going to include that, then, and if it's okay to have this piece performed, it's even more okay to have a conversation about it. Yeah. And we talked about this with regard to, I'll let you have the floor just a second. We talked about this with regard to the death of Klinghoffer last year, and that live stream being pulled from the Met. One of the things that they didn't do leading up to the Metropolitan Opera performance, and it was regularly compared to some other performances of the Klinghoffer opera earlier in the year, in the previous years, the same production in St. Louis. They did a number of community outreach and a number of kind of public conversations and fora about the work itself and what it meant and relationships between Israel and Palestine and terrorist groups in various parts of the Middle East, and what happened in Klinghoffer in real life and in the opera, and how that might tell us something about terrorism today. And there were a lot of really interesting conversations that went on about that, and there were no protests at the St. Louis performances. And maybe it's just the difference between St. Louis and New York City, but I think one of the things that people kept pointing at was that they actually did care enough to, when they were putting this performance together, engage the community on this topic. And I wonder if something like that could have helped a performance like this if Tarm had just said, explain what was going on. You don't think so, Sam?
Well, I think I was going to get Nate a chance to talk.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, the composer refusing to talk about it feels more like a no comment kind of thing, more than like that this work should stand for itself.
Well, he said that no work should stand for itself and referred to Mahler.
Yeah.
Right, who famously
My work, like
removed...
Mahler, should stand for itself, right?
Well, like Mahler famously removed programs from his works, right? The most famous example is the First Symphony, where he wrote it as a program kind of reflection on a novel, The Titan, and then later removed that name and said that this work stands on its own. And was kind of cagey about programs for other works of his, where he said that there was a program, but he wasn't going to tell you what it was.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of stupid, but whatever.
Yeah. And I suppose music is interesting in that way, where like it can just be all the frequencies and the sounds and everything, and remove all the context of how it was generated and stuff, and it can like often be appreciated in that same way. I totally like I can just imagine the youth symphony trying to figure out how to engage this question, wishing they would have had a little more lead time on it, and not have and being embarrassed about not noticing the reference themselves and things like that.
Not having lead time doesn't mean that it can't still be something they talk about fruitfully.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, I want to be clear that I think that the piece shouldn't have been pulled, and if he wants to be as cagey as he's being about it, that's perfectly his right.
Right.
But having said that, if I were his friend, I would have suggested you should probably say something about this being in there. Just from, I tell my students you got to be practical, when practicality is called for, and that seems like a pretty practical concern considering where it's being played.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And
it's not a criticism. It's just that's what I would have suggested to him.
And my concern would be, going forward, the chilling effect that this would have on other composers, right? If you are a composer who wants to write a piece about totalitarianism, there are not a lot of more obvious musical expressions of totalitarianism than Nazi music.
Yeah, and music has precious little in the way of that kind of absolute correlation that can be drawn, So literally,
right? There's not a lot of literal expression that's available to us without singers and words.
And if we're made to be afraid to use that kind of stuff, especially the composers who are more prominent and get heard more often, I wonder if John Luther Adams would have something to say about this. You reckon?
Well, so this is the thing. Is like, what is the next person who gets a commission from the New York Youth Orchestra, or the New York Youth Symphony, or the New York Philharmonic going to do if they want to write something that is about that stuff? They're going to limit their expression. They would at least think about limiting their full range of expression because of this experience.
Yes.
Right?
Slippery slope, guys. Slippery slope.
I was just thinking of a great Deadwood quote about
That's what I started laughing about.
dropping the F-bomb and using one's full range of expression.
When you said full range of expression, I started laughing.
Yeah, I assumed that's what you were laughing about. So that to me is the biggest concern, is what this means to composers moving forward. Because I wouldn't want to spend it's trying enough to write orchestral music, and I wouldn't want to spend all that time writing it and then rehearsing it and then not have that performance happen, right? And what if this had happened before the premiere, and the piece would have not been premiered, and then it would have been tarnished as that Nazi thing that kid from Estonia wrote, and then who would perform it then? I don't know. Hopefully, some more adventurous and more open-minded and creative professionals than work for the New York Youth Symphony. I think Shauna Quill is, who's the executive director of the New York Youth Symphony, is absolutely cowardly in her public statements about this. And if that means that the New York Youth Symphony is not going to commission me to write any music, then I don't think they were going to begin with. But I'm absolutely outraged at her decision and the way she has expressed it in the press.
Yeah.
And
it's completely indefensible.
The fact that this has to be something that's covered by the press, to me, is the craziest issue. Like, if they just, oh, this is there, okay, well, let's talk about it like grown-ups, Let's make sure that the kids in the orchestra understand the context, and then, put out a statement to the press if we need to, and that's the end of it.
That, to me, was the most insane part about it, is so many people commenting on the fact that it was kids performing it. Who cares? Are you telling me that we're not going to teach kids world history anymore because it has Nazis in it?
Well,
that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
And after the concert, when you go home, they're still going to hate you and think that you're ruining their lives. So either way, what do you care?
I don't understand. Like, yes, they are 12 to 22-year-old kids, and you know what? They are smart enough to play an instrument well enough to play in the New York Youth Symphony Orchestra, so they could probably handle understanding what Nazis are and that they're like a pretty evil concept, and they had a culture that included some music, and this is a quote from one of those songs. Like, I don't understand why that is a complex idea for these students.
Yes.
If anything,
Or for culture
this is an
at large.
educational experience for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's
We're
insane.
not into that around here.
No. Yeah, depending on where they live in the United States, they may even heard about it in like an AP history class or something. But
So,
In Oklahoma, maybe. No, wait, not so much anymore.
so I expect the next New York next New York Youth Symphony concert will feature selections from Lawrence Welk.
Yes. All right, that's enough angrily agreeing with each other. We need to
Baby
move
Elephant
on.
Walk. You know who to call.
Shall we press on?
I suppose.
forward.
It equally groan-inducing news to me, at least. Avery Fisher Hall has a new name. It's going to be, I assume, David Geffen Hall,
Yes.
unless he, couches his name in some other verbiage.
No, I think it's
Whatever
going to be
its official
David Geffen.
name.
I think it's going to be David Geffen Hall.
Okay.
We talked about this a while ago that Lincoln Center had bought out the Avery Fisher estate. Essentially, they paid them back a certain amount of money for the rights to put the name of the hall up for auction again, basically.
Fresh money.
So to get some new money, because they're doing a huge renovation of Lincoln Center, and David Geffen, media mogul, and a founder, CEO of Geffen Records, which is part of the Interscope Universal giant record exec conglomeration, and Geffen is one of the richest people in the world. He donated $100 million to Lincoln Center for the renovation of the hall, which is, according to most of these reports, about 1/5 the total cost of the renovation. But he's going to get what is currently Avery Fisher Hall named after him, and they will start performing in it as David Geffen Hall, I believe, this coming September, right?
Wow.
So we're moving fast at Avery Fisher, much faster than such things normally move. And then, last of all, before we get to our interview with wonderful conductor Alan Pearson, we've got some more conductor news. We've talked about all of the openings for high-level music directors around the world. One of them is no longer open. Simon Rattle has announced that he will be taking a position with the London Symphony Orchestra. So that is one of those positions that is no longer available. He starts in 2017. So congratulations. I don't know whether to congratulate Sir Simon or to congratulate the London Symphony Orchestra, but I think good things are in store.
And anybody who was taking a long shot on their replacing Alan Gilbert pool and had your money on him, sorry.
Yeah. You're going to cross that one off your bracket.
He was a long shot anyway. I mean, seriously.
We really should do some kind of bracket challenge.
There's no way he would have gotten past Gonzaga.
Our March. Yeah, dude, Gonzaga's hot right now. Though they almost lost last night, so you never know. Here's the thing with the conductor game on any given night, you never know when you're going to come up against Florida Gulf Coast.
Yep. It's interesting, I think, to note that Avery Fisher Hall has been Avery Fisher Hall for quite some time. Avery Fisher was an electronics mogul, so physical objects, right? And David Geffen is a record executive. So
Well, he was a record executive back when that meant physical objects too.
yeah, but he wasn't
not a young man.
He wasn't a manufacturer.
Sure. But that's what we do in the United States. We don't actually make things anymore. We just think. We sit in rooms and think.
Yeah.
Yep.
We ideate.
Yep.
And we
move knowledge around and
anyway. That's going to do it for our news segment. We tried to keep
Thank
that pretty
God.
short. We didn't really succeed that well, but
No.
we kept it kind of short. And we're going to move in now to our interview with Alan Pearson. So this is a pre-recorded interview from a couple of weeks ago, shortly after they had premiered their project. And Alan Pearson did not tell us confidentially before or after the program anything about his availability to be the New York Philharmonic's music director. I'm just saying, he did not tell us any of those things.
Yeah.
He didn't deny, for instance, strong-arming Simon Rattle into taking that London job to keep the New York job open for him. He didn't deny doing that.
So here it is, our interview with Maestro Alan Pearson.
Didn't deny.
All right.
Did we have a name for this one already?
We should. I'm going to do a rap real quick.
Okay.
And that was our interview with Maestro Alan Pearson. Thank you so much for listening to this week's SoundNotion. This is SoundNotion 197. We're getting pretty old, and we don't get around so good anymore. So if you would like to find us, you're going to have to come to us. We're at soundnotion.tv/SN, and you can find links to the stories that we talked about, including a great essay in New York Times this week by Zachary Wolf about the New York Youth Symphony situation. I strongly encourage you to check that out. All the links about Avery Fisher and about Simon Rattle, those will all be on our site, as well as information about what Alan Pearson and Alarmal Sound are up to. If you would like to connect with us on the social media, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're on Twitter. You can subscribe to this show and all our shows in the iTunes Store. Please go there and do those things. Thank you so much for watching or listening, and we will see you back next week.